The Zoreth had never known conflict. Their civilization was a marvel of harmony, a perfect blend of intellect, artistry, and biological advancement. The land was a breathtaking symphony of vibrant forests and serene oceans, all carefully cultivated to preserve the delicate balance they had maintained for millennia. Their cities were crystalline structures that hummed with energy, elegant spires rising from the earth like ancient trees, towering high yet never disrupting the natural flow of the planet. Every aspect of their society was designed to prevent discord, and in their eyes, they had perfected the universe's grand design. They had no concept of war, no history of battle. There was no need. The Zoreth were physically powerful, their bodies built for grace and strength, yet they had evolved beyond violence, using their intellect and advanced technologies to solve every problem without shedding a drop of blood. Their wisdom was unmatched, their understanding of the universe profound, and their peace was absolute. So when the scouts first detected the faint energy signatures of a ship entering their space, there was no reason for alarm. Such things had happened before. Visitors from other star systems arriving in search of knowledge, trade, or scientific exchange. The Zoreth did not fear such encounters. They welcomed them. As they observed the tiny ships making their way toward the capital, the leaders of the Zoreth gathered to prepare for what they believed would be another peaceful first contact. However, something about this human fleet intrigued them. It was small, only a handful of vessels, and they lacked the advanced cloaking technologies or grandiose ships the Zoreth were accustomed to seeing from other civilizations. The humans seemed unremarkable. Their technology was primitive compared to the Zoreth's, but that only added to the mystery. A message was sent, an invitation to meet, a simple greeting. The humans responded almost immediately, confirming their intentions to land and discuss an alliance. The Zoreth were puzzled by this. The humans had no grand demands, no claims of superiority. They simply wished to join their peaceful civilization. Eldor, one of the highest-ranking leaders of the Zoreth, was chosen to lead the first official encounter. He had a deep fascination with other species, a hunger for knowledge, and an openness to new ideas. As the delegation of Zoreth prepared to receive the humans, there was little suspicion. Eldor believed the meeting would go as any other, an exchange of information, a shared vision for the future, a few questions answered. But deep in the back of his mind, an odd sense of unease lingered, a strange, whispering instinct, buried deep in the heart of even the most peaceful Zoreth, tugged at him. He had seen it in the humans' faces. Something about them was different. He couldn't have known how true that feeling would turn out to be. This sets up the peaceful, naive worldview of the Zoreth, contrasting sharply with the impending shock they'll experience when they meet humanity. There's a sense of calm before the storm, building a quiet tension as the story hints at the hidden power of humans. The human ships descended slowly into the atmosphere of Keltar, their engines emitting a soft hum as they pierced the tranquil skies. The Zoreth watched from their crystalline citadel, their eyes fixed on the unfamiliar vessels. Their appearance was a stark contrast to the pristine, organic beauty of the planet below. Rough, angular, and utilitarian. Yet, the ships had a strange elegance in their simplicity. There were no markings, no signs of military origin. The Zoreth couldn't help but find that peculiar. In their experience, all visitors from the stars had some form of grandeur, some display of superiority or force. Yet, the humans came with nothing but an invitation and an open hand. Captain Jack Turner stood at the head of the human delegation, staring out from the viewport of the lead vessel. His crew, 8 men and women, the best humanity had to offer, stood by his side, equally mesmerized by the strange beauty of Keltar. They were the first humans to step foot on an alien world, chosen not for their strength or diplomacy, but because they had been tested by the harshest of environments. War. Turner wasn't just a leader. He was a soldier battle-hardened by years of conflict. He knew that peace was a rare and fragile thing, and he couldn't help but feel an odd sense of foreboding as they descended. Still, he pushed the thought aside. This mission was a chance for humanity to forge an alliance, to show the universe that they weren't just survivors. They could be more. They could thrive. As the ships touched down on the soft, green plains, a welcoming party of Zorath officials awaited them. The humans disembarked in perfect unison, their steps confident yet respectful. Turner, tall and unshaken, was the first to approach Eldor, who stood at the front of the Zorath delegation. The alien leader's presence was imposing, nearly 7 feet tall, with sleek, metallic skin and eyes that shimmered with an almost otherworldly intelligence. But despite his intimidating appearance, Eldor's expression was one of curiosity, his posture open, his claws held lightly at his sides in a gesture of peace. "Welcome, humans," Eldor said, his voice deep and melodic, carrying the weight of 1,000 years of wisdom. "It is an honor to meet you. I am Eldor, and I speak for the Zorath people." Turner offered a brief but warm smile, extending his hand. "I'm Captain Jack Turner. These are my colleagues. We've traveled a long way to meet you, Eldor, and we bring peace with us. Our people seek cooperation." The alien hesitated, not because he was uncertain of the gesture, but because it was so foreign to him. The Zorath had no tradition of physical greeting. They had evolved beyond such primitive exchanges. But after a moment's pause, Eldor stepped forward and extended one of his long, graceful limbs to clasp Turner's hand. The moment their palms met, something shifted in the air. The tension that had lingered just beneath the surface suddenly crackled to life. This section heightens the contrast between the humans and the Zorath, showing the difference in their worlds and perspectives. There's a growing sense of unease that foreshadows the drastic shift about to occur, all while maintaining the peace-driven nature of both species. As Eldor's clawed hand made contact with Captain Turner's, the air around them seemed to vibrate. For a brief moment, everything stood still. The Zorath delegates, ever the picture of calm and poise, watched intently. The humans, standing a little apart from their captain, exchanged uncertain glances. They had practiced this moment, rehearsed their gestures and words, but they couldn't have predicted what would happen next. Eldor's hand, long and elegant, was suddenly rigid in Turner's grasp. His face, usually serene, twisted in an expression of shock. His eyes widened, pupils contracting sharply as if he had just encountered something utterly incomprehensible. A low growl rumbled from deep within his chest, not one of aggression but confusion. An alien sound, even to his own ears. Turner froze, his grip still firm but growing puzzled. "Eldor," he asked, his voice laced with concern. "What's happening?" Before Eldor could respond, a sharp, blinding pain shot through him. It was like nothing he had ever experienced. No physical injury, no wound, just a searing, unbearable sensation deep in his chest. His vision blurred, his knees buckled, and for the first time in his life, he fell to the ground. The Zorath delegation gasped, their calm shattered. Eldor's powerful body convulsed, his claws digging into the soft grass beneath him. The Zorath were masters of their own physiology. None had ever known pain in the way humans did. For them, any sign of physical discomfort was immediately remedied by their advanced technologies. Pain was something the Zorath had simply evolved beyond. And now, this alien creature, this towering leader, was experiencing something that could only be described as agony. Turner, more instinctively than rationally, crouched beside Eldor. "Eldor, talk to me," he said urgently. "What's happening?" The Zorath leader gasped for breath, his once proud composure crumbling under the weight of the sensation. He clutched his chest, his voice strained, barely a whisper. "I don't understand. Pain. It cannot be." Turner's brow furrowed in realization. Something had gone wrong. Something he hadn't anticipated. The Zorath had no concept of suffering, no understanding of the threshold their bodies could endure. He had read reports, briefings, about peaceful species encountering violent ones, but this was different. The aliens were not reacting with fear or violence. They were simply overwhelmed. "Hold on, Eldor," Turner murmured, his voice low and steady, though his mind raced. "You're going to be okay." The Zorath delegate stepped back, unsure of how to help. Panic began to spread through their ranks as Eldor writhed on the ground, his form twitching and spasming as though the very fabric of his being was being torn apart. Turner's eyes locked with Dr. Emma Hayes, a human scientist on his team. She stepped forward, kneeling next to the alien leader, her brow furrowed in deep concentration. She understood now. The Zorath were experiencing human pain for the first time, and it was a force they couldn't begin to comprehend. Eldor's convulsions slowed, but the confusion lingered. His breath was labored, his body trembling as if it was on the brink of something unimaginable. The Zorath had never known pain before, and now they were learning just how powerful it could be. Eldor's body lay motionless on the ground, his eyes half-lidded, struggling to regain some semblance of control. The pain that had racked him still lingered, a dull ache pulsing beneath his skin. The Zorath delegates stared at their leader in horror, utterly baffled. The alien world, so accustomed to harmony and balance, had now been pierced by an experience they never knew existed. It was the most unnatural thing they had ever encountered. Eldor's convulsions had stopped, but the aftershocks were deep, unsettling. Captain Turner remained kneeling beside him, his hand gently placed on the alien's shoulder, trying to provide some comfort. His mind raced. The humans had come in peace, and he had hoped to foster a cooperative relationship with the Zorath. But this was something else entirely. He knew that the Zorath were a powerful species, but they had never encountered pain like humans had, something essential in their biology that allowed them to push past their limits, to endure and fight through suffering. Dr. Emma Hayes crouched beside Turner, her face pale but composed. She had seen human resilience in the field, in combat, but this was new. "Captain, I don't think they know what happened," she whispered, her voice laced with disbelief. "This isn't just physical pain. They've never experienced this level of suffering. Their bodies aren't built to handle it." Turner nodded grimly, turning his attention back to Eldor. "We need to help him," he said. "We need to make him understand what's happening." The Zorath delegates hovered nearby, unsure of how to act. Their leader was incapacitated, their perfect world shattered by the alien force they had no name for. One of the younger Zorath stepped forward cautiously, a female with iridescent skin that shimmered in the sunlight. She looked at the humans, her voice low and shaky. "What have you done to Eldor?" she asked, her tone sharp with confusion. "What is this?" Turner stood slowly, turning to face the young alien. "We haven't done anything. We're not responsible for his pain. But we understand it. We've all felt it. Humans, I mean. Pain is part of who we are. It's something we've learned to survive." The young Zorath shook her head. "This should not be. We do not feel this way. We do not experience suffering." Her voice wavered, like a leaf caught in an unseen wind. "Our bodies are perfected. We have no need for pain." "That's where you're wrong," Dr. Hayes interjected softly, her voice calm but carrying the weight of experience. "You may not have needed pain until now, but it's always been there. It's part of the cost of living, of fighting for survival." She paused, looking down at the fallen Eldor. "Humans don't just survive. We push through pain and come out stronger." The words hung in the air, thick with the weight of an alien truth that the Zorath were unprepared to grasp. Eldor, still recovering, blinked slowly, his mind clouded with confusion. He had never experienced this weakness before. It was like a chasm had opened within him, one that his mind could not yet understand, but it was there, gnawing at him. The moment stretched, an uncomfortable silence hanging over the group. The Zorath, so accustomed to their perfection, now found themselves vulnerable, and they were beginning to understand that they had much to learn, perhaps more than they had ever considered. Eldor's breathing slowed as he struggled to sit up, his mind still clouded by the alien sensation of pain that had surged through him. His body trembled, not from weakness, but from the overwhelming shock. Around him, the Zorath delegates whispered amongst themselves, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and growing fear. It was clear that none of them understood what had just happened. Eldor, still recovering, stared at the humans who had caused this strange, debilitating sensation, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and anger. Captain Turner stood tall, observing Eldor's struggle with concern, but also a quiet resolve. He knew the Zorath couldn't fully comprehend the human experience. Their peaceful existence had left them untouched by suffering, and now they were face to face with a reality far harsher than anything they could have imagined. For the Zorath, pain was as foreign as war. Dr. Emma Hayes knelt beside Eldor, her voice gentle but firm. Eldor, what you're feeling, that's pain. It's something every human experiences in one way or another. Some of us more than others. She glanced back at the humans standing in the distance, many of them battered from previous skirmishes, their faces showing the wear of past conflicts. Pain is a teacher, Eldor. It's not something we escape, it's something we endure. The alien leader's golden eyes met hers, full of confusion and something else. Fear. He had never been afraid in his life, not in the way humans understood fear. But now, faced with this unseen, unstoppable force, he realized that he was vulnerable. The Zorath, whose minds and bodies had been honed over countless centuries, had no defense against this fundamental weakness of the body. We do not understand, Eldor rasped, his voice trembling with frustration. How can your species live with this? Endure it? Dr. Hayes sighed deeply, looking over at the humans once more. We don't just live with it, Eldor. We use it. Pain is a part of our survival. It teaches us our limits and forces us to push beyond them. She paused, letting her words sink in, then added quietly, pain is what makes us strong. The Zorath leader's head tilted slightly, his mind racing to absorb what she was saying. He was beginning to comprehend the enormity of the gap between their two species. The Zorath had evolved beyond the need for pain. They had created a perfect society, free of suffering and conflict. But now, it was clear that they lacked something essential, a key part of survival that humans had mastered in the harshest of ways. Eldor slowly stood, using the support of a nearby stone pillar to help him rise. His movements were stiff, his body still unsure of itself. As he steadied himself, he looked to the humans once more, his voice tinged with awe. You endure this willingly? Captain Turner nodded, his expression serious. We don't just endure it, we fight through it every single time. And every time we do, we come out stronger. The Zorath stood in stunned silence. What they had thought was their greatest strength, perfection, was, in fact, a flaw. They had never needed to fight for survival. They had never known what it meant to face the void, to push against the very limits of existence. And yet, here before them stood a species that thrived not in spite of suffering, but because of it. The reality was beginning to settle in. The Zorath, in all their peace and harmony, had never truly understood what it meant to be alive. Dr. Hayes explains the human concept of using pain as a tool for growth and resilience, creating a stark contrast between the peaceful Zorath and the fighting human spirit. Eldor's growing understanding of this alien concept adds depth to the story, setting the stage for the Zorath to confront their vulnerabilities. The silence that followed was thick, leaden with the weight of revelation. The Zorath stood motionless, processing the words that had been spoken. Eldor, though still shaken, had managed to regain his balance, but his mind was far from settled. The very idea that humans embraced pain, that they used it to grow, was a concept so foreign to him that it seemed almost impossible to fathom. He had never needed to question his own physical state. Never once had his body betrayed him or left him vulnerable. The Zorath had evolved beyond that need, their perfection ensuring they could achieve everything without suffering the way other species did. But now, standing before this human delegation, Eldor couldn't escape the truth that tugged at his core. In the face of pain, the humans thrived. They did not fall apart or retreat. They fought through it and emerged stronger, more resilient. What did that mean for a species that had never known true weakness? Eldor, Captain Turner's voice broke the stillness. This is a lesson for both of us. What you've experienced isn't just about physical pain. It's about how we face the unknown, how we endure what we cannot predict, and fight what we can't control. Eldor turned his gaze to Turner, his expression still one of disbelief, but there was something else there now, a flicker of curiosity. "How do you learn to endure?" he asked, his voice low, almost hesitant. Turner took a deep breath. "It's not something we can teach in a single moment. It's a lifetime of experience. Pain is a part of every human life. Loss, failure, injury, they all come in different forms. But we learn. We adapt." The Zorath delegates began to murmur among themselves, their voices a soft hum in the air. It was clear that this discussion was starting to challenge everything they had believed about themselves. The harmony they had so long prided themselves on had kept them insulated from the harshness of life. They had eliminated all but the most essential challenges, and in doing so, they had created a world without the trial and error that fueled human evolution. The young Zorath who had spoken before stepped forward, her skin still faintly shimmering. "Captain Turner, you say your species fights through pain. But how does that make you better? How does it make you stronger?" Her voice was tinged with skepticism, but there was an underlying tone of wonder, as if she had glimpsed something in the humans that was both alien and captivating. Turner met her gaze. "Pain makes us better because it teaches us what we're made of. When you're forced to face something that seems impossible, and you fight through it anyway, you learn something about yourself, about what you can truly endure." He paused, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "You can't grow without struggle. You can't evolve without challenge." Dr. Hayes stepped forward, her expression soft but resolute. "The Zorath have perfected their society, but perhaps it's too perfect. Perhaps there's no room for growth. Maybe that's why you can't understand this, because you've never had to grow the way we have." The words hit Eldor like a wave. He had never considered it before, but now it felt undeniable. His people had avoided the hardest truths of existence, wrapping themselves in the comfort of their perfect world. But they had never truly tested their strength. They had never had to fight to survive. A deep quiet settled over the group once more, the air thick with understanding and uncertainty. The Zorath had much to learn about themselves, and they had just begun to realize that their so-called utopia might be the very thing that had held them back. The Zorath start to grapple with the deeper implications of what the humans have shared. There's a growing sense of introspection as they consider their own limitations, and the narrative begins to shift toward an exploration of the human ability to adapt and grow through struggle. Dr. Hayes and Captain Turner's words challenge the Zorath's worldview and hint at the journey of transformation they will face. The heavy silence persisted as Eldor stood, his mind turning over the humans' words. The Zorath, once a species of harmony and order, were now faced with the profound realization that their perfection might have come at the cost of something essential. Pain was not just a consequence of the body's fragility. It was the fire in which resilience was forged, the crucible that tested the true strength of a being. Captain Turner stood across from Eldor, sensing the depth of the alien leader's internal conflict. The humans had come to teach, to share their knowledge. But now they were seeing something else unfold. They weren't just educating a species, they were watching the birth of a transformation. The Zorath were being forced to confront their own limitations in real time, and there was no going back. "We've seen the consequences of living without struggle." Dr. Hayes spoke up, breaking the quiet. "The Zorath have built an advanced society, yes, but it's been one built on the assumption that perfection is enough. That if you remove all pain, all suffering. You remove all obstacles." Her voice grew firmer. "But what happens when the perfect society faces something imperfect?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Eldor shifted uncomfortably, his eyes narrowing. "And you believe we are flawed because we have no pain?" "No," Turner answered before Dr. Hayes could. "I believe you are stagnant because of it. Pain isn't just about suffering. It's a tool. It's the force that pushes you forward when everything else holds you back." His voice softened. "If you avoid pain, you avoid growth. If you avoid growth, you risk losing everything." Eldor's golden eyes locked onto Turner's. There was no anger, no resentment, only the quiet weight of the leader who was beginning to understand that his people had built their utopia on a fragile illusion. He had prided himself on his species' avoidance of conflict, of pain, but now, standing on the precipice of something deeper, he questioned whether his people's isolation from suffering had made them weaker than they ever realized. The young Zorath who had questioned Turner earlier stepped forward again. "But how do we change?" she asked, her voice uncertain. "How do we learn to live with pain?" Eldor's gaze flicked to her, and then back to the humans. "We have known only peace. It has been the core of our existence. To embrace pain now, to learn from it, this is overwhelming. How do we begin?" Turner looked at his team, then back at the Zorath. "It's a choice. You can continue to deny it, retreat back into the safety of what you've built, or you can face it, learn from it, and grow." He paused. "Pain doesn't have to destroy you, Eldor. It can strengthen you. But only if you choose to let it." The air around them seemed to shift, as if the very ground they stood on held its breath. Eldor turned his gaze toward the horizon, where the twin suns of Keltar cast long shadows over the land. There, on the edge of the world, he saw a path, an uncertain one, yes, but one that might lead to something far greater than the perfect world his people had known. "We will face it," Eldor said at last, his voice steady, though there was a hint of vulnerability beneath the surface. "We will learn what it means to endure, together." A collective sigh seemed to ripple through the Zorath delegation, though their faces remained uncertain. They had just begun a journey they were not prepared for, and the road ahead would be fraught with challenges they had never imagined. But it was a path forward, and that perhaps was the first step toward true evolution. The Zorath are forced to confront their deepest fears, the idea that their utopia might have led to stagnation, to an inability to truly grow. Eldor and his people now face a choice: to cling to their perfect, pain-free existence, or to take the difficult first steps toward embracing pain and change. The shift in their mindset begins, and the stage is set for the Zorath to embark on a new path, one that will require them to face their vulnerabilities head-on. The sun began to set over the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape of Keltar. The world felt quieter, almost as though it too were awaiting the shift that was taking place. Eldor stood at the edge of the assembly, his posture straighter than it had been earlier, but his mind still awash with the gravity of the choice he had just made. He had known his people as a species of great power, a race that had never needed to fight for survival. But now, for the first time, he felt the weight of what it meant to be truly alive. "We will face it," Eldor had said, but the words felt more like a vow to himself than a proclamation to the humans. Pain was an unknown, something that could break the strongest among them, or make them something greater. And the Zorath had to learn how to wield it, not as a weapon, but as a teacher. Captain Turner stood nearby, his arms crossed over his chest. He had been prepared for many things, but even he couldn't have foreseen the full extent of the journey ahead for the Zorath. What he had seen today wasn't just the experience of alien species learning about pain. It was the dawning realization that change, true change, wasn't something that happened quickly or easily. It required introspection, struggle, and the willingness to face things that no one had ever thought to challenge. Dr. Hayes approached Turner, her voice thoughtful. "Do you think they'll really be able to do it?" to change everything they've built. Turner looked at her, his face serious but not without hope. I think they will. It won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight, but they've made the first step. They've admitted they have something to learn. And that's the hardest part, Dr. Hayes added, a wry smile tugging at her lips. Admitting you're wrong when you thought you were perfect. The two shared a brief moment of camaraderie, knowing that the hard work ahead would test the resolve of not just the Zorath, but the humans as well. They would be there to help, to guide, but in the end, the Zorath would have to decide how far they were willing to go to evolve. Eldor turned back toward the group, his expression one of quiet resolve. He addressed his delegation, his voice stronger than it had been earlier. The humans have shown us something we cannot ignore. We must embrace the challenges they face, the struggles they endure, and learn from them. His gaze swept over his people. Our society was built on the assumption that peace is enough. But peace without growth is a cage, and we are no longer willing to remain in it. The Zorath delegates looked at each other, some with uncertainty, others with a growing spark of something new, curiosity, perhaps, or even hope. They had built a world free of pain, free of the constant friction that the humans had endured for so long. But now they understood that the absence of struggle did not mean the absence of weakness. As the last of the daylight faded, Eldor looked toward the stars, the distant lights twinkling in the vast expanse of the universe. The path ahead would not be simple. It would require sacrifices, effort, and a complete rethinking of everything they had known. But it was their only path forward. The Zorath had chosen to change, and with that choice came the promise of something greater than perfection. Something human, growth, resilience, and the endless potential of becoming. The Zorath began to embrace their decision to evolve, acknowledging the need for struggle and growth. Captain Turner and Dr. Hayes reflect on the significance of the Zorath's willingness to change, and Eldor's speech marks the beginning of a new era for his people. The story closes with a sense of hope, as the Zorath step into the unknown, ready to face the challenges that will ultimately shape their future.